being here. This is our special event with Columbia University, and I have a fabulous panel right here for us. My name is Vibha Kaksi. I'm the CEO and founder at ReachIvy.com. And at ReachIvy, we help aspiring students get into top-tier universities for undergraduate, master's, MBA, PhD, and executive education programs. Today on our panel, we have alumni from 3 different degrees. We have Lisa Mangaldas, who has an undergraduate degree from Columbia University. She studied English and visual art at Columbia, so we have a strong liberal arts component coming in from her. And we have Priyanka, who has a degree from the journalism school, so they call it the J School over at Columbia. Thanks, Priyanka, for being here. Priyanka's done a variety. She's done a variety of things. She's been an author with several top-tier publications. She recently wrote a book that was quite contentious. I'd love for you to talk about your experience writing the book. She's also a awardee of the CNN Young Authors, Young Journalists Award 2007. So thank you, Priyanka, for being here. And I have my favorite Columbia Business School alumni here who has been on, I swear I have seen him at least 5 Columbia MBA panels. He's a real loyalist, and his way of giving back to the school is by representing Columbia at these panels. So thank you, Ritvik, for being here. Ritvik has an MBA from the Columbia Business School, and he runs a family business. So we try to bring in a family business element as opposed to a pure finance element for this panel to give you a variety of the diversity of options available at Columbia. So let's get started with a little flashback into your childhood, early years, schooling, parental influences. Give us a flavor of what life was like growing up.
Okay, so I grew up very much a Bombay kid. My parents probably still have one of the largest libraries, personal libraries in the suburbs. So I grew up surrounded by books. My school too had a phenomenal library. Just being around books, I kind of came to think of them as friends. And that early influence was pretty huge in terms of just appreciating new authors, discovering new authors, stumbling into them. While growing up in the 90s, seeing the Babri Masjid, seeing the Kabul War, all of these had an enormous influence on trying to understand the world around me. And I realized that I love the interplay of a good turn of phrase, a good description that accurately captured something that I was witnessing. I was not long before I figured that journalism is what I wanted to do. And very early on, I kind of figured that J School is...
Okay, so I'll get into why you picked J School, but you're talking about early years being...
So this was how I kind of knew that I wanted to be a journalist. And these were some of the things that were influencing that choice for me.
Alright, I grew up in Goa, and I went to boarding school in Kodaikanal, and I did the IB there, and I really enjoyed the sort of interdisciplinary nature of the IB as a sort of curriculum. And also, I think my biggest struggle, I was a super academic, super nerdy kid, and I loved school so much, and I literally, I regret not having more fun, honestly. When I look back even at college, that's my biggest regret, because there's more to life than studies. But I was so studious that I just wanted to do everything. And the idea of having to choose one subject was really difficult for me. I really wished that I could continue this nature of high school and college. And so I applied to Cambridge in the UK and to Columbia, but the draw that the US had for me, is that you can study lots of different subjects. You don't have to pick right.
So what was the family environment like growing up? What was the boarding school environment like?
So my parents were actually very bohemian and did not put any pressure on me, which I appreciate. Advice to parents putting a lot of pressure on their kids. I think it does help also to let children, gravitate to whatever interests them, because it's hard to force someone beyond the point to do something they don't want to do. So I think that my instincts eventually were to go with sort of creative fields rather than, I didn't end up studying economics or engineering or other typical things that Indian parents make study, but I was still a very, very academically oriented kid. And I think I really liked that my parents allowed me from a young age to pursue something like art or English or, to read and draw and write poetry rather than being like, no, this is a waste of your time. Go do these other things. Because I really believe that we live in a time when you can make a career of anything. You don't have to do the doctor, lawyer, engineer, finance kind of like stream. And boarding school was amazing. I loved being in boarding school because I think it kind of gave me a first taste of what life in college would be like, because you're like doing everything yourself and having to like get used to life without parental supervision all the time. And so I think it almost made that transition much, much easier, the fact that I'd gone to boarding school.
So now my family really has a huge emphasis on education and on entrepreneurship. Like my maternal grandfather was the biggest influence on me. He kind of came to Bombay when he was about 10 years old from his village, and really with nothing. Like he had 3 sisters and a mother to support back home. So he kind of went to night school, built himself up, managed to go to Stanford for an MBA, then actually ended up going to Stern to complete it because he didn't have the money to finish off. And then he came back and started the family business. On the other side too, like by coincidence, my paternal grandfather also went to Stanford for a master's in science, came back and became the vice chancellor of Alumni University in Chennai. And similarly, like my dad has a master's in science from Stevenson in Stevenson Institute in New Jersey. My mom was actually an MBA at the time, was like one of only 5 MBAs in her class at Jamnawal Bajaj over here. So, I come from, I guess, a very high pedigree in education, and I felt the pressure very young that I had to kind of be this person when I really don't think I was. What happened was that, going through school, my mom put a lot of pressure on me. She wanted me to do well at everything, whereas my dad was really the kind who said, you need to kind of learn by yourself. Like he'd learned tennis and swimming and all by reading books. Okay, so like he was exceptional in his own right. But these are standards that as a kid you don't really know what to do with. So I just kind of obeyed my mom. I was very obedient. Like my teachers, I really respected authority as a kid. But I felt somewhere that the education system was kind of selling you on a dream, an impossible dream in some sense. There was all this pressure to do well in the 10th, and that's supposed to be the exam that defines you for your life. And suddenly after that, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So it was like, okay, well, you're good at science, go into science, and then go become an engineer. And I get past the 10th, and I think I've done great. And suddenly I go to the 12th, and the 12th is supposed to be the greatest exam of your life. And now, that defines who you are. And by this time I had friends who were in engineering school, and they were like, man, every year is like crazy, man. Every year, you're dying to like finish your grades and you're dying to pass. And I'm like, there must be more to life than this. There has to be something more to life than this. And I was someone that never understood the social dynamics of school, which is why I didn't really enjoy high school so much. I went to a good school here, I went to Cathedral, and the school is great. My son is in there right now. But I never understood social dynamics. Like how to be cool, how to get on the sports teams, how to, just enjoy school. I really didn't get that. And I think I felt, by the time I got to 12th, I felt restricted by it. And I just knew I had to at least leave the protected confines of Bombay and just find myself outside. So I ended up going to undergrad in Boston, really. And that for me was when, I was very naive. I'd say I was very naive and underconfident coming out of high school. And going abroad kind of helped me get away from that. Just appreciate my parents more, because you finally realize how much protection they give you. And at the same time, realize some things on your own. Realize how to live alone, realize how to cook once in a while. Not well, but still. But basically, getting a sense of myself, like living in this great but still cloistered life over here, and then going abroad and kind of becoming myself. Okay.
Cool. So it sounds like you guys have had very different upbringings, and they've sort of worked in very different ways for you. So you're saying you have this library influence in your house, which gets you into reading. You said your parents pretty much left you alone, very bohemian, go do your thing, and you ended up becoming an academic nerd. And you come from this high-pressure academic environment, and you sort of have a reaction to that. So it's very interesting how different parenting styles have, brought out 3 different offsprings, but they've all worked out ultimately, which is the good news, I guess, for the parents.
They always do, yeah.
So
Well, still to be seen, okay?
So you guys talked a little bit about how you got into journalism. You spoke a little bit about that, because typically the audience and students in this age group of, I would say, is 13 to even sometimes up to 27, still fairly confused about career orientation. What is it that I want to study? Who do I want to become? Sort of like this large question of life that we all faced at some point. You guys seem to have cracked it, right, in some capacity. So how did you figure out what it is that you want to study? And you have very defined roles that you play in society. You're a journalist. You're on TV hosting the Indian Super League, the football league, and obviously you have a family business that you run. How did you figure it out?
No, I know that these days, when we were growing up, there was always this pressure. The doctor engineer thing has been going on for a long time, and I think for me it helped that my parents were very hands-off in that sense. I was very lucky that I discovered a passion for something that I felt I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And I think it was just sheer luck. I don't think I was doing anything. I don't think I had the comprehension that I needed to find something. It just happened. Between the books and everything that was going on around in the world, the 90s were a crazy decade. Everything that was going around, and discovering the writer I was, I realized that this is what I wanted to do. So it was really, I stumbled into it more than.
So you feel like you sort of stumbled into it, but that library in the house sort of set the foundation.
Set the foundation.
Great. Okay.
I feel like maybe we're at slightly different stages in our careers. I definitely think right after, I'm 28, I graduated about, 6, 7, 8 years ago. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. And I think it definitely took me like a few years to figure out what I wanted to do. So, I think it's funny how as a kid you're asked like, what do you want to do when you grow up? But you've never actually done any of it. So you might say, I want to be whatever, the CEO of a company or an astronaut or whatever it is. But if you've never set foot in that environment or had an experience of what that workplace is going to look like and what those job expectations are going to look like, what do you know? So I would highly encourage people to explore a few things before committing to something, because life is long, and you don't want to be stuck doing something you don't love. I think the sooner you realize in life that money is not going to keep you, that there's so much more to life than money, and that actually making enough money to survive is not that difficult. I feel like
So where did that realization come for you? So how was your journey?
So I was not so, because maybe partly the influence of growing up in Goa with two parents who prioritized quality of life and things like creativity, and in Goa it's easier to have a lifestyle, I guess.
Yes, absolutely.
That you're in the middle of nature. You don't have to be very rich to have a dog in a garden and things like that. I don't know what it was, but I think that realization that a sense of fulfillment comes with a sense of purpose and something larger than just financial goal. I feel like that was a very empowering realization, and that was emphasized in my childhood, because I think so often you can just get caught up in keeping up with the Joneses, and especially in a city like Bombay, I feel like people are driven. I see my own peers driven by things like who's driving what car and which watch they're wearing, and these are not, I don't think long term, those are goals that are going to give you a sense of fulfillment. And I feel like the sooner you realize it's okay not to know, and it's healthy actually to look at a bunch of different options before you commit the next 10 years of your life to doing something you might not care about, the better. So even if it takes you 3 or 4 years out of college, doing internships and, or even whatever.
So you have your own YouTube channel, you're hosting, the Super League. I know you write a lot. So is all this creativity being channeled in multiple ways because you're still trying to figure out which one it is, or do you see yourself?
I just knew that I didn't want to be an employee.
Okay.
That's what I knew out of college. I didn't want to sit at a desk at a computer making someone else's dreams come true. That was just the only vision I had. But honestly, what that could look like could be a bunch of things, right? You could be an entrepreneur starting your own company, or you could be a writer or an artist or a chef or whatever. There's so many things that in today's day and age involve not being an employee. And I think so many young people are choosing those streams of freelance or entrepreneurial or whatever you want to call it. work, and the internet makes it so easy to do that because you have this way of marketing yourself and accessing, resources and clients and everything so easily. So I don't know if I don't know if I'll be a sports presenter the rest of my life. I probably won't. But I do think that I've spent the last few years figuring out what I stand for, and I hope that I can be a brand in a way where everything I do, even if it's writing here and on TV there and my YouTube thing, it all makes sense together. You know what I mean? Because I hope I can be consistent in a certain value system.
Sure.
I love what you said, because Priyanka, you're the kind of person that I would envy when I was younger, because you had your passion. Like, you found your passion, you took the time to figure out, and then you just pursued that. Like, as somebody who didn't honestly have an overriding passion for a long time, that was something I did. I'd look at people like me and be like, wow, man, I wish I was like that. I wish the answer was like there right in front of me. And I love what you said, because I get that you can get addicted to activity. I think in Mumbai, a lot of times we just want to say we're doing work.
And most people don't know their passion.
Absolutely.
And it's easy to fill that not knowing with money.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with the job that pays me the biggest sum of money because I don't really know what I want to do, but nobody's going to question me if I have this 6-figure salary.
Or even something like, I'm stuck all day in meetings. Like, people love to say they don't have the time to do anything.
Absolutely.
And you're like, well, what exactly are you doing? Like, whatever you're doing, you can always spare time to do things that are important. For me, I didn't really have an overriding passion till I was, for a long time. What happened was, I went to undergrad, decided I was going to be a computer engineer because my dad said, look, computer's the next big thing, and you're going to be an engineer, take this, okay? The undergrad taught me, at least, that I definitely wasn't going to be a computer engineer. I was very grateful because Northeastern had a co-op program where you worked for 6 months and studied the other 6 months after your freshman year. So you graduated in 5 years, but you got 2 years of work experience, actually working at a company, actually getting a salary, actually being in a professional environment. And what that taught me was, I first started off in technical support, just answering phones. Then as your engineer knowledge grows, you get into product development, quality control. So somewhere through that, I understood what the stages of a company were. Like, what an engineering company does not mean you just sit and code. It means you actually have different departments that do different things. There's an accounts and there's finance, and these were all things I know they seem simple to all you guys today, but as an undergrad, learning about this stuff was okay, this is what working is actually like. So I come out of computer engineering. I had a good vocabulary. I used to read a lot as well, and I used to write on my own as well. I've been writing poetry for a long time. Then poetry was too personal, so I started writing fiction by myself. And I actually thought when I came back, and I was just I have this degree that's useless. What do I do? What do I actually do with my life? And I thought I might want to be a writer. Primarily, I realized I didn't see the need for my family business. I just thought, well, it's just there. And I said, I'm going to go to it just to figure out what this thing is worth. And then when I'm in control, I'm going to sell this thing, and then I'm just going to write. Okay, that was my dream. Okay, big plan. So I go in there, and I think the reason I didn't want to do the family business was because I thought my grandfather done everything. I thought he just done everything, and I was being this baby with a silver spoon who was just getting everything handed to me, and that irritated me. I wanted to be someone who made my own way. Going with the family business, I realized there were still challenges today. I realized the challenges that he faced when he was starting out were very different to what my mother faced and to what I was going to face, and that there was a chance for me to build my own legacy in there. Gradually, going through that stage, something I realized that to make myself happy, I actually just wanted to have a positive impact on as many people as possible. Okay, and when I looked at the ways to do that, along with going to the family business, I started volunteering at a ground shop and being a volunteer teacher. I would spare 3 days of my week just to do that. I would go to work, go 3 days a week, and the rest of the time I would play basketball, because that's actually the second thing I do today, is along with running my family business, I coach and I play for the YMCA men's basketball team. Okay? And what was funny was that I was just doing a ground shop because it made me feel good. I was playing basketball because it made me feel good. I was going to families because I finally saw purpose for myself in kind of building my own legacy. And when you do something repeatedly, again and again, and you just focus on it, you tend to get good at stuff. Being in the family business, I suddenly realized I had to learn about being a leader. So I'm reading everything I can about how to manage companies, about how to work companies, what differentiates a bad company from a good one, from a great one, and reading all that kind of literature. And finally I hit a ceiling where I was like, okay, now there's a limit to what I can learn practically. There's a limit to what my grandfather, my mother, and my father can teach me. this is why I need school. And that's where, like, you know, the MBA and Columbia kind of came up. But that's how I figured out what I'm doing. I'm still doing basketball today because I plan on pursuing that to some extent. I think I'm developing some good coaching expertise. And I hope to kind of carry that on to somewhere, because I can see basketball as a way to kind of affect people positively as well.
So someone in the audience brought out the fact that they don't know what the future looks like, and it seems like you've got a range of responses right here. So you might stumble into the future, you might just happen to be at right place, right time. You might have this value system that you adhere to, and then you find different channels or outlets to live out your value system. And then you might have, like Ritvik, a situation where you're born into a certain situation, but then you find purpose and validation in building it out. So if these sort of sentiments resonate with you, then probably try these as channels to figure out what it is that you want to do, because it really truly is the cornerstone of your teenage and early 20s. Just figuring out who is it that we want to be. It's like, I think it's the question to ask and figure out an answer for. And thank you guys for sharing such personal stories and trying to help the audience figure out how to figure out what they want to do. So that was very helpful, thank you. Let's talk about how you went to Columbia. So what was the search process like for you? Did you look at a lot of universities? Were you very sort of narrowed in on Columbia? What search process did you go through? What about Columbia struck you? And why did you ultimately decide to go to Columbia?
Can I go first this time?
Yes.
Just
Because it's
my
Columbia, that's
no, just because my story, well, I hope it's like yours will just seem so much better. So when I was about 25, there was a girl in New York that I actually wanted to go, and I just, whatever, I thought there was a chance that we could have a relationship. And so it started from there. I really liked this girl, and I thought, I'd like to be in New York. And at that time, the mistake I was making was that I just thought an MBA was just a degree. Okay, I didn't know where it was going to add value to my life, but I knew, well, like my mom and I told at some point you need an MBA. And at that point, that was all it was to me. It was just like, okay, it's a degree I need to get, but I may as well get it in the city with the girl I like. Like that sounds legit. And so I did a very, the first time I applied for business school twice, not to Columbia. For some reason I didn't realize in my source that Columbia existed, luckily. I just applied to 4 or 5 schools around that area, and I got rejected. Because looking back, I realized I was just doing it just for the degree. I was doing it for all the wrong reasons, okay? And so that failed. But a couple of years later, like I mentioned earlier, that I finally realized what I want an MBA for. Like as someone who wanted to be a business leader who was running a company, I didn't really understand finance very well. I didn't really, what I thought at that time was that I was a decent leader. Columbia showed me that I could be much better as a leader, much better as a teammate, much better in terms of, and the last thing was I didn't have a vision. Like I knew my grandfather had a vision and I was trying to enact that. But to be able to form my own vision, to be able to actually look at the relevant factors that determine how you make a company, how you build a team, I needed to understand that. And for that, I needed to sit in the classroom and actually learn, not be distracted by work, but actually sit and devote myself to learning. So when I hit that ceiling at work, I kind of realized that, okay, I was doing something wrong the first time. And then I started looking a little more at the culture of every school. And what I understand is that all the top schools, like any good company, they all really know what they're doing, okay? And every one of them has a very definite set of values and a philosophy and a culture that they kind of promote. It's very subtle, okay? Like what I mean is, it's not things like, most people who go to top schools are like smart and motivated, that sort of stuff. But there's a certain element that, the school kind of promotes because that's the way it sees the world. And honestly, there are many different ways to succeed in the world. That's why they all work and that's why they all exist. It's important for you as an applicant to understand what that culture is, whether you are someone who's comfortable with that culture. So what was
it like for you? So what was that kind of culture?
I felt Columbia was a very collaborative community in the sense that, like I said, we all want to win and we all have no problem working hard. But Columbia believes that the power of many. If we can combine our talents together, we will do something exponentially better. It's not just simple addition. You will go way beyond what you could ever dream of, and that's the idea of kind of changing the world and being better. So that really attracted me because that I feel was the kind of person I was. Like I played basketball, which is a sport in which one guy is never going to make anything, no matter what they show you on the highlights. You need all those 5 people invested. In fact, you don't just need those 5 people, you need the other 4 guys on the bench, plus the coach and everybody else invested in that team for the team to do really well. And I think the more I understood myself, it was like this, the school selected me more than anything else. And the second time I applied only to Columbia.
Oh, you only applied to that?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, which my parents thought was crazy. They were like, what makes you think you're so good that you can this great school's gonna accept you? But I think I just had complete clarity about what I was doing, why I was going there, and even the way I presented my story was specific to what I understood Columbia's philosophy was.
Are you ending the story with what happened with the girl?
Yeah, so the girl didn't work out, and it's a lesson for everyone in life is that, man, it's okay if something doesn't work out. Like, life turned out way better. It's alright. I hope she's happy wherever she is, but man,
You definitely are.
Hey,
That's a great.
you do your thing. but I'm good, thank you.
So why Columbia?
When I had to apply to colleges, actually I think you do the SAT for so long ago now, 2007. But I think after doing the SAT, colleges actually started sending me letters.
Because you probably did a really good job on your exams.
So I remember one of the first colleges to send me like, come apply to us, was Columbia. And having grown up in Goa and Kodi, which were like the most isolated rural places, and the idea of living in New York City was like, I thought it would be a great counterpoint to the childhood I had. And also I felt if they were writing to me, I should, when good things happen, you should go with them. So I applied early decision to Columbia, which meant I wouldn't apply to any other US school. But I also applied to Cambridge because they have an incredible art history program. And I was very lucky to get into both schools. But Columbia gives financial aid. So whereas UK colleges do not give Indian students or non-European Union students financial aid. So it was like a no-brainer because it was like virtually a free ride for other than very
Pretty
expensive
amazing.
education. So I was like, thank you, Columbia.
So it was the New York.
So it was New York, and it was, also what I really like about the undergraduate program at Columbia is this thing called the core curriculum, which regardless of what you end up majoring in, you have to do. I think it might have evolved slightly since the time I was there, but essentially you're studying almost like 9 or 10 courses that are considered just a foundation in any learning. So there's like, a history course, a literature course, a science course, you have to do some art, music, and it's like a very holistic humanities education, that whether you're going to major in physics or poetry, as I was saying earlier, you have to do. And I loved that. Some people find that like demanding and a waste of their time if they are very focused on something else already, but for me, that was like my dream. So, yeah.
Hey, yeah.
My story involves a boy.
Maybe my girl and your boy are married. That is kind of everything.
No. So, very early on, I went to, when I was still at college, doing my undergrad here in Mumbai, I knew that I wanted to go to Columbia J School. It was considered one of the best journalism programs in the world. And for me, that was enough. I didn't really know that much. I didn't really have people who I could talk to and figure it out. It was still early days of the internet. There wasn't that much out there. So anyway, I'd set my heart on it. I was working at Times of India midday. I was at All India Radio for a long time while I was still at college. Trying to build up the right profile that would help me apply to the school. When I met someone, and it was a whirlwind marriage. And before I knew it, I was at Stanford, where he was doing his MBA. I found myself on the wrong side of the country there. And I figured, you know what, the Berkeley program in journalism is also fantastic. And why not apply there? And I did, and I got it. And my husband tells me, "Did you want to go to Columbia, didn't you? Did you apply?" I'm like, "No." He didn't let me take that.
The Berkeley admin, oh wow.
He was like, "Let's go for it." And I went to build up the right profile, the right admission essays, the whole 9 yards of it. We actually flew to Afghanistan to do some reporting there for the San Francisco Chronicle and a few other guys. And they wrote those essays, wrote the stuff. I was at Columbia the next year.
Wow. Nice. So for you, it was just like you wanted to be in the #1 school in the world. Period. That was your that was your stuff.
It was very simple.
It's simple.
It was very
Very
simple.
easy.
There was not
It's
much
not
thought
the
going
best.
on there. Yeah.
So for you, it was like going to the best. For you, it was like going to one of the best, plus getting a free ride at one. of
But
the
also the best at New York City.
best. And New York City.
The best in New York City.
And for you, you see that this is cultural vibe
Absolutely.
that you felt.
Absolutely.
Okay, so variety of reasons, all of which may or may not resonate with everyone here. Let's talk a little bit about life at Columbia, right? So we've talked about your early years, journeys and paths, and how you got to Columbia. So what happens at school? Any sort of really standout experiences where you're just like, oh my god, I'm never going to forget this thing that happened at Columbia?
Okay. I'll go first on this one. So when you're doing journalism in New York, even if you're studying it, it's a really immersive boot camp kind of thing where you're literally picked up and thrown out on the street. All right, cover this area. You could be an international student who doesn't have that much context around what's happening. And context really is the most critical element of journalism. If I don't know how to make sense of what I'm seeing, it's very hard for me to explain it to anyone else. So in that sense, it was a profoundly intense experience of being in Harlem, being in some of the gentrification was going on at that time. So Harlem is the north of Manhattan Island, kind of. Yeah. And those areas are prone to a lot of crime, a lot of. Back then, it was a very dangerous area to go into. I don't know if it still is though.
Much better.
Much better.
Yeah, much better.
So yeah, I was writing a story about a shooting that had happened, and I'd gone in to interview people around, to try and figure out that this is. I'd worked for Minty, I'd covered crime in India, but this was a whole other scale of things where you're going into this dark building on a dark New York evening, and you're trying to interview whoever is there. And it's really like, it was one of those buildings which were, I forget what it is called now. Those red brick buildings?
Projects?
The projects. So it was one of the projects where it's red brick from the outside, but when you go in, it's usually green.
It's like low income
green
housing.
walls, all the way stretching as far as you can see. There's stairways somewhere, but you can't really see them. It's very low lighting. There's a drip somewhere, for sure, like one of those movies. And knocking on any of those doors is a frightening, it's a frightening moment. So I remember going in there, knocking on one of the doors, and this lovely black woman, she opens the door, and she's like, "What you doing here?" And I said, "I would like to ask you some questions about whatever had happened upstairs." She just slammed the door on me, and I was like, "Okay, maybe I'm making a mistake being here all by myself." The next day I went back with a couple of friends, but that was my moment when I realized. That was it. Earlier when I was talking to you about how they just pick you up and just throw you into the street and you don't really have a context. This was one of those moments of realization that, cultures and subcultures, and even within a small fragment of a community, the way you interact, the way you ask questions, sometimes your life can depend on it. So yeah. A fun, crazy journalism experience.
I had so many great moments at Columbia. I feel like I came of age at Columbia. I was 17 when I got there. So I had so many first experiences in college. But I think probably two of the most historic moments I got to witness was when Obama got elected the first time. I was on campus, and Columbia is super liberal. And so it was like, everybody there, most people there voted for him, and it was.
He was a professor there, no?
He went there
Okay, yeah.
briefly. And also so Harlem, which has been significantly gentrified since you left, I guess, is also a predominantly African American area, and that's just north of Columbia. It's become very trendy and everything now, but it is also, most people in that neighborhood had voted for Obama. So the celebration in the area and on campus and everything was just, it was like history was at the first black man president in America. It was an incredible moment to witness. And he ended up being, just standing for so much that I believe in and such a great president. So it was great to be in Obama's America. I'm not sure what it's like now. I think one of the big things that Columbia really stood for was freedom of speech, and it was a very resilient community. I think that one of the aspects of Indian society right now, which I find really disconcerting, is how intolerant we are of any dissent. And I think if your beliefs are really strong, you should be able to hear out contradictory beliefs and peacefully hear them out. You can't be so challenged by someone that's different from you that you want to shut them down. And I really learned that at Columbia, because there's there might be people who say things that are absurd or outlandish or even hateful, but instead of reacting immediately, you listen and find a peaceful way to resolve that. And I feel like the student community really, it was the closest I've been to living in utopia. The amount of just peaceful conflict resolution. There's thousands of people on campus. It is literally like its own little town, and it has its own security, and it has its own all kinds of welfare groups and unions and all of this stuff, and yet it operates for the most part extremely well and efficiently, and sort of with a high degree of social harmony, even though there's so much diversity. And I feel like at moments like these, I can give you another example, is the president of the university invited the president of Iran, Ahmadinejad, to speak on campus, and he'd been denied entry into the US on grounds of violating human rights and basically for being a terrible person. But they granted him entry to speak at Columbia, and this was such a great example of the fact that just because you disagree with someone, it doesn't mean you don't hear them out. This is a man who is hugely homophobic. Gay people are routinely, even murdered in Iran. Obviously, this is not something that Columbia would stand for. And so, but they asked him all these tough questions, totally put him on the spot. And it was just, I think, amazing to see a peaceful but very hard-hitting dialogue with someone whose views you obviously don't agree with, but it's playing out in a civilized way. And I think just to be able to witness that degree of tolerance, and I wish I could say the same thing for America right now. I don't know what it's like right now.
How do
It's
you
changed
feel
so much.
when he turns
Yeah,
around
I
and you
know.
ask stupid questions?
I know when Trump got elected, because I'm still in touch with a lot of my professors and stuff, I heard that it was midterms going on at that time, and the atmosphere was so, it felt like someone had died. I have goosebumps just thinking about it. People canceled the midterms so that kids could go to counseling if they needed to. No, I know it's funny here, but yeah.
So very interesting. So super liberal school celebrating Obama's victory, and then when they have President of Iran come, that event I heard was sold out. There were no spots in that audience.
Because also Columbia has a street that runs through it, so the public can come into campus as well. It was being shown on screens all over the lawns, and so anyone could come and sit and watch. But there was high security, and it's so open. I feel like that accessibleness of just making education accessible to the larger community as well was a great part of that.
I think Columbia's always had, the beat movement started over there. You had student protests back in the 70s and all was started over there.
Yeah.
So it's always been on the edge of culture, and I think always trying to have dialogue, like Lisa said, with many others' points of view. So all our stories.
Ambedkar went to Columbia.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay for us. But I think all our three stories are going to feature Black people, which is a great thing, because part of Columbia is actually understanding Black culture. Okay. When I went to Columbia, we have happy hours in the business school where there's just chances for students to socialize and be together. And so my first happy hour, we're sitting together, we're all sharing beer and food in this dark area. And I get a tap on the shoulder, and there's this big, really, really strong Black guy, and he taps me, and he's like, "What are you doing down here? Come up to room number 312. And here's the thing, like this is America post 9/11. So as a brown man, you're kind of like, this must be the airport where they're taking you aside, and security checking you. So I thought it was something like that. But I go up to this room, and all of a sudden they have hard alcohol there, and they have a little more upbeat music, and everyone's great, and they just welcome me in. They give me a drink. They say welcome to Colombia, all this other stuff, and I was having a great time. And one of them takes me aside and says, "Listen, man, we love Colombia. We're part of it, but we always want to keep a little separate spot for people of color to get together." Now, just to give you context, I've shaved my head at 25. Okay, so I've been living like this, and I feel like I'm Indian and look Indian, wherever. But they thought I was black. And I look around the room, and I realize everyone else in the room is black. And I'm like, oh, what just happened? And so then they say, so then they're like, so where are you from? What are your roots? All that things. And a part of me wants to just lie, because it's so cool to be there and just pretend I'm black and pretend I'm black for the next 2 years. but luckily I'm like, okay, this is I'm Indian. I'm 5 generations Indian. There's no doubt. And what was interesting was that a lot of them didn't believe me. They just didn't believe me, because I guess there are a lot of people that deny their black roots or black culture, and they were like, really, are you sure? Do you have an ancestor from Africa? And I'm like, no, no, I don't. But I did say, I said, listen, I really like hanging out with you guys, and if you still have me, I'd love to, still hang with you. And they said, no problem, not at all. They said, we've had white people join us. So I became part of the Black Business Student Association. I actually got elected to their board despite them knowing I'm completely Indian, okay? And I served the same position in their organization I did in the Indian organization. I joined the Indian one as well, and I was conference chair for both of them. So I organized conferences for both of them. Now, why do I bring this up is because, in a time when it is hard to hear, there's so many opposing points of view, there's no real right answer that life tells us. It's important to understand what diversity really is. And I know that being there, like I thought I knew history roughly, about black culture and black history. I thought I knew, what the civil rights were, things like that. Hanging out with these guys really gave me an understanding, a true understanding of what race relations are all about. I can't say I understand it completely, but I'm definitely closer to the truth than I was before. And a great part of doing that is understand the commonalities that you have with them. As Indians, we've also been under colonization. We've also been oppressed. We also, in some ways, I think, we also suffer from a little bit of, we are humble sometimes because we believe that's the way to be, because that's the way we've been taught, or it's been ingrained in our mindset to be from so many years of suppression. And I think today we're finally finding our voice and finding our ego and finally standing up for ourselves a little bit. And it was great to see people who've already done that, or who are also kind of on that same path, and learn that you can take examples from it. You understand, they've taken things from Gandhi. I think Martin Luther took things from Gandhi in the civil rights movement over there. So understand those commonalities, really, that's, at least I know it was eye-opening for me to realize a lot more about myself, and a lot more about how I can do better as a person. And also, to kind of come back and what when I coach kids today, when I talk to my employees today, when I am kind of teaching my own son today, what I'm going to kind of teach him and help him grow up to be.
Wow. Thanks for sharing those stories. It's very interesting about the Colombia panel is you guys have really picked sort of instances that, it's like a historical moment I want to talk about, and then the ramifications of being at Colombia during that time. And you didn't go into like a specific class at Columbia or someone you met on campus. You gave us a real example of how you were just thrown out into the big bad world and go figure.
I'm actually going to circle back to something that he said.
Sure.
Because it ties in so well with this first instance of that first month in New York City, a newbie out of nowhere, no context of the racial relations there, to then going on to these classes where we read Maya Angelou and Souls of Black People, and somehow reading it there and living there, reading these incredibly articulate and astonishing words of how humanity can be divided and brought together, was in that sense it changed the way I saw all racial conflict and all the community conflicts, and has gone on to inform a lot of my writing as a journalist in India as well.
And I feel like in a weird way, I don't mean to make assumptions, but a lot of Indians who study abroad at a school like Columbia or any Ivy League school or whatever, because it costs a certain amount of money just to live there and all of it, you tend to be like from a relatively privileged background. I don't know, most people in this room probably from South Bombay, I could be wrong, but, and so I feel like in a way your childhood tends to be with people who are kind of homogenous, like similar, you know, you speak English on the dining table, everybody's like probably middle or upper middle class, probably roughly the same economic background and religion and all of that as you, and then suddenly you're in this place, but and particularly in New York City, I don't know about other, you know, other schools in other cities, but it is so diverse as a city, so diverse that you could literally meet people from every religion and country in the world and economic background, and they could all be your classmates even. So I feel like the black culture is an amazing element of life in the US which you discover, but then there's also like Jewish culture and meeting Chinese Americans and meeting Latino, yeah, exactly. So, and these are just the big minorities. But if you look at, you know, even, I mean, the most obscure cultural group will have representation there. So I feel like just to have your worldview suddenly expand like that, to incorporate so many different
and I think you understand there are different paths to truth, there are different paths to success. And they're all working in their own way, you know. So you get a true understanding of what tolerance actually is, and what respect for other people's beliefs really is.
And how much actually we have in common as well.
Absolutely.
Even though it might seem like there's a lot of difference.
There's a lot of difference, yeah, completely.
Okay. It's very interesting choice of stories, guys. And I was going to ask you guys about the New York advantage or the New York element of being at Columbia, but just the stories that you guys have picked are very symbolic of the New York experience of being at Columbia. So I'm going to fast forward and ask my next question about, maybe share a little bit about what you guys do. Priyanka, especially you are very interested in, you know, share the story about the Ramdev book a little bit, and, you know, maybe talk about your experiences. You've done so many TV shows and the auto show, and then moving to sport, and how that journey was for you. And if possible, if at all, any elements of the Columbia experience that you feel transcended back into, you know, India and into your workspace, and if not, then you don't have to force it, but if you feel like there were any elements of your education.
Sure. So I think there was a professor who played a huge role in my understanding of what journalism is. The school itself, it's transcended from, it started at a point where yellow journalism, I don't know if you know the expression, that it's, you know, this trashy kind of tabloid journalism, where you sensationalize the news. It started from there and has gone on to an age of fake news. It's covered a huge, wide range of just how we tell stories and how we describe our world. Having said that, while the school itself represents the ethics of how journalism should be practiced, there are always these professors who have an overarching influence that somehow bring that the heart into the ethics of it. And my professor, he's a twice Pulitzer Prize winning New York Times reporter, a guy called Barry Burak, who's done some amazing stories out of Afghanistan. He was a New York Times bureau chief in India for a long time. Sorry. And he sort of really through, you know, calling many other great writers and many terrific journalists, a guy who sort of had discovered the mass graves of Bosnia, and just these amazing writers who live in New York. He brought them all into the class, and you discovered that at the heart of telling stories about other people is really empathy, about being able to walk that mile in some other person's shoes, see the world through their lens, and be able to articulate that perspective so that someone else from a very different walk of life can at least connect with it and understand it. It's one way of building those bridges that are fast disappearing in our world today. For me, this influence was something that informed most of my work at Mint, where I covered the business of religion in India, where I actively looked for stories that talked about the connection between communities, between religions, and brought out the element of the humanity in the religion. So I wrote about people waiting to die in Varanasi, where, with life expectancy expanding, people would show up in Varanasi. By the way, if you're Hindu, you might know that if you die in Varanasi, it's believed that you will get moksha and release from the circle of life and death. So people by the age of 60 would show up thinking that, okay, it's a few years to go. And before they knew it, they were 90 years old, waking up every single day, waiting to die, hoping that this day will be their last. So these were some of the things I wrote about. The Ram Setu. You may remember that bridge between India and Sri Lanka. Had some terrific experiences. I actually walked on that bridge. We had, at that time, LGD was still around. So we had an Indian Navy chopper come up, and like some fishermen took me there, and the chopper came really low on that island, saying like, "What do you guys think you're doing?" But that moment when you saw Sri Lanka on the other side and India, and somehow the mythology kind of comes to life. It was a fantastic experience. We wrote about Muslim artisans who basically make all the conches, all the bells, and do the work that is used for the pujas in the temples. These beautiful interconnections between communities. But I'm going to quickly jump to my latest book. It's a book called Godman to Tycoon. It's the untold story of Baba Ramdev. And because I focus on the business and politics of religion, I felt that the story of this one man has come to symbolize the story of India. It's just how the country works. How a completely illiterate child of an illiterate farmer managed to, create an empire that has multinational corporations running for the hills, was something that the distance he has traversed and how he has got there was, to me, extremely fascinating. And it truly represents how things work in our country, how alliances are made, alliances are broken, all of that.
The question was, how did New York or Columbia shape what you're doing today?
Did it shape you in your career choices?
So I think
and you were also the president of the Columbia Association here in India for many years.
The
Alumni Association. So anything about the life after Columbia and the.
I think Columbia impacted or shaped the person I am in a big way. I think I've learned how to read and write and think at Columbia, and I feel like that sounds a bit. I mean it. It really, I think, gave me a skill set that is extremely transferable and very, very valuable, particularly in, I aspire to be a journalist as well. I think you do some work for money and some work because you believe in it, and you try and get the two to coincide as much as possible. When you're starting out, you take the opportunities that come your way. So it happens that I do sport, and I've done a car show, and but neither sport nor cars are my beats as such. The areas that interest me more are topics to do with the experiences of women, the experience of millennials, and so I try and write on those topics as well. And I have a YouTube channel dedicated entirely to sharing the experiences of women around topics like sexuality and gender and things like that. And I think being in New York as a young woman and being allowed a degree of freedom, even though I grew up in Goa with a super liberal family, I don't think I've ever felt freer as a person than in New York City. I really think regardless of who you are, your identity is celebrated in that city in a way that is so unique and so, again, I don't know what it's like in Trump's America, but back then, it was so refreshing to be able to see so many different people just be themselves without fear of judgment, There was no log kya kahenge at all, and it was just so refreshing to see what comes out of that level of freedom, So I definitely think my experiences there shape the content I'm creating today and the person I am today, and the network I was able to build that has helped me as well. Like I write for Forbes, and that I was put in touch with the Forbes team in Hong Kong by a Columbia alum from the journalism school actually, things like that. So I did chair the alumni chapter here, but honestly, my work involves so much travel that I had to step down from that role, and it's difficult to get people to do that role because it's a lot of planning and people get busy with their lives and everything. But I think the personal relationships you foster more than taking on any alumni chapter head and this and that, those friendships you build in college and the professional network you might build with your faculty members and guest professors, whatever it is, I think the meaningful relationships, not just the random emails you send to some illustrious person hoping for a reply. I think those stand you in good stead. The person you're brushing your teeth with today might be, the author of a book or the owner of a company or whatever else 10 years from now. And I think those are the absolutely priceless connections that you might benefit from originating from.
So I've seen a bunch of the YouTube channel, I've seen a bunch of your shows, and definitely the topics you bring up are far away from log kya kahenge. I think you're really trying to dispel this myth about just have these open conversations with you and each other. And clearly, Priyanka, and definitely Ritwik, you definitely guys don't care about log kya kahenge. You've been sort of marching the path that you've chosen now. So it seems like a very Columbia and perhaps New York feel to your experiences. Ritwik, for you, translating Columbia.
No, definitely. I think for me, the most important thing was that Columbia was the first place where generally, when you go to an educational institution, okay, you always go by their reputation and what they kind of mean. You expect that you're going to now be part of that brand, and then that kind of I guess enhances your understanding in society or whatever else. And of course, you're hoping for some learning from them. But Columbia was the first place that actually made me feel welcome coming. Like, despite the fact that yes, they're Ivy League or whatever it was, they really make you feel like they want you. That was one of the best things they ever do. And I mean, I don't want to ruin it for anyone who does go there, but especially in the business school, we have something called peer advisors, which is the second year or the second year students take charge of the orientation of the first year students. And I mean, being MBAs, they've planned everything out down to the minute, but they really do a great job of having both formal and informal activities. And it's great for Columbia because it's completely voluntary. They're not paying them anything to do it. And these guys are taking out actually a week from their vacation to come and do this for the new kids. But it's a very personal feeling that they have. Like, for me, every other school I went to, I went to a good school in Bombay. I went to a reasonable school, for undergrad as well. I never got that kind of feeling. For me, it was a perfect confluence of when I was actually ready to learn and I had an institution that was ready for me. And those 2 years at Columbia were honestly like the best time of my life, because for once, learning wasn't work, it wasn't effort, it was just something that I was doing just because it felt so good to be part of that experience, be part of that student body. I was learning interesting things, I picked whatever class I wanted. I also went to Columbia to answer an important question for myself. I felt an attachment to nonprofit work, and at the same time I had this family business. And something I wanted to answer myself was, do I want to go into the nonprofit sector, or do I want to continue to run a company for profit? And with like Hindu values and things like that, which I've kind of grown up with, today I'm pretty much I'm pretty much an atheist. But at that time it was like there's a bit of Hindu philosophy where they say, well, you shouldn't be attached to money. Don't be attached to this. Don't go after it. It's wrong to chase after material things. And I really had to resolve that conflict for myself. Going to Columbia, I took a lot of courses in social enterprise. I took a lot of courses in management, in understanding the finance of a company. And I think, one of the best things was that I was able to answer that question for myself at Columbia. Honestly, since leaving Columbia and coming back to the real world, life hasn't been that great. Okay, I've lost a couple of family members. I got married. I'm just kidding. I'm married. Okay, I've had a son, which is great. Okay, but it's been tough. Like, business goes up and down, and like life just goes on. But Columbia was at least the part where I really felt like I just kind of recharged myself. I know when I was about to leave Columbia, I really felt prepared for the world going out. There's obviously a lot more work I have to do on myself as a person, but I know the school did everything it could for me, and that's exactly the reason why I love it. That's why I kind of come to hopefully represent what Columbia is meant to be, because I'm hoping that for especially for Indian kids, I hope they go to a school that actually values them, and I hope that they go to a school that really brings the best out of them in the beginning. And I know Columbia is very good at doing that.
Okay, so one last question before we open out to the audience. So we have a lot of parents here in the room, And while the parents are nodding, saying, oh, these things are fabulous, great experience, very liberal, you meet all these people from diverse cultures, all that, but they got to write the check. So, and I mean, in your case, I guess your parents escaped that one, but typically, it's a pretty high investment, right? You got to pay for 4 years or 2 years of these programs. So from an ROI perspective, all that money and time, now in hindsight, was it all worth it? What's the ROI like?
Business school, I think, probably, it probably has the biggest questions to answer because it probably has the most expense associated with it. That's understood. Okay, I think, fortunately, unfortunately, business school costs more than any of the other degrees there. Look, I get it. It's a huge investment, not just of money, it's of time and it's of effort. Okay, can you take out 2 years of your life to go and learn something of that? And if you're going there to learn something, it better be worth it. It better be absolutely, absolutely worth it. Okay. And I would say that of an MBA at any school. Okay. My understanding is that Columbia knows absolutely what it's doing with an MBA. They know absolutely what they're doing. And the reason they try to, it might seem like the essays, are hard, or that, your application seems so arduous if you do it right, is because they want to make sure you really want to be there, and they want to make sure you have complete clarity as to why you want to be there. The people who know absolutely why they're going there, what they intend to get out of it in the short term, what they intend to get out of it in the long term, and at least what their plan is at this stage, those are the people that are going to get in. And coming out of there, you're going to make, what you make in terms of, like Lisa said, in terms of personal relationships, in terms of just life experience at the school. Like I remember being at school and it was the first time they had Warren Buffett and Bill Gates come and speak together. Okay. Also, we had, I'm a huge basketball fan, but we had David Stern, the commissioner of the NBA, who's a Columbia Law School alumni, come and speak to us in a room as big as this. We had Roger Goodell, who's a commissioner of the NFL, come and speak as well, and just so many experts and people who are good in what they do. As a person myself, watching these people and learning from these people, and even like I said, my own professors and peers are so accomplished. I had an Olympic fencer who was a silver medalist Olympic fencer, an NFL player, not like so many guys who work for the investment banks that were so smart. It pushes you to be better. A lot of times we settle for mediocrity because we kind of go to a place where everyone else is mediocre, they don't have very high expectations, or everyone's constantly pulling you down, and you kind of think, oh well, I'm great, because you're comparing yourself to people who aren't great. You go to some place and it's a very humbling experience, because everyone is smarter, everyone knows how to work, everyone has done some brilliant stuff, man. And you suddenly go, okay, I need to be better. And I think the process of finding that for me personally was very personally motivating to do that, and understanding also how that it doesn't take a lot to do that. Just it takes a little sustained effort, it takes cutting out the irrelevant stuff from your life to actually see that. And a great school like Columbia teaches you how to aspire higher, frankly. And for a country like ours, you need that. Because you look at, we just, as people, we need to expect more out of ourselves, and then we can expect more of the system and whatever else we feel is ailing us over here. So that's how I go with that.
I'm really glad you brought up the point about raising the bar, because you went to a good school in Bombay, as most of us did. You went to Cody, I went to JB, you went to Cathedral, you were in a really good school. Typically, we were all you said you excelled in academics, so we were all, let's say, in the top 15 percentile of our class to give a broad number, which is what enables you to then study at a top tier school. And then you feel like, oh, I'm pretty good at school, I've been getting all the awards, and I'm in the top 5, 10, whatever. And then you end up at an Ivy League school like this, where you're suddenly confronted with the top 5 or 10 of every school in the world, and you're suddenly in a classroom that suddenly IQ-wise and you're experientially you're at par with. And that's when you realize that, okay, now how do I come in the top 5 or 10 or 15, if that's even important, in this sort of shortlisted, self-selected pool of candidates. And that's, I think, when you really, sort of, the pressure hits and you realize, oh, I've got to really aspire to be next level even within this pool of candidates. So I'm really thankful for sharing the story.
I think that it's worth knowing though that, at least at the undergraduate level and at the time that I was at Columbia, their financial aid policies were incredible. That they would, for international students, it was not need blind, when they would, if you applied for financial aid, they would take into consideration how much you were applying for when reviewing your application, unlike for American students. But if you got in, it was gift aid, not loans, which meant you just got that, you know, the scholarship money.
So for you, it wasn't money, but
so,
like,
no, but I'm just saying that's an amazing thing as a foreign student to have those kinds of.
So that's changed a bit since.
Has it changed
It's
a bit?
changed a bit. So
Oh,
for you specifically, like, it wasn't so much of the money, but it was still your time, right? So how was the ROI for you in terms of spending your 4 years?
I honestly felt so like lucky. I just felt so, somebody that sit in class, and because we had some incredible professors, and I feel like, what did I do to deserve to be here?
Oh.
Like, it was just, I think as he was saying, it's a gift to be able to just learn. Like, your purpose for the day is to learn. And I think it's unfortunate that many people take it a bit for, you know, lots of, you're in college, you want to have fun and everything, which is also, I think, part of the experience. But if you do choose to take classes with the professors that, you know, each university has a tip though, I think, actually, is you should choose your professors wisely, because there are professors and there are professors.
Yeah.
But there's some people whose thoughts will like shape you, which you think about years and years later, and you just feel like, what a gift to have witnessed this person share their wisdom with me.
They make learning fun too. Like they're so innovative actually
People who
with
are
the
like
teaching.
shaping their industry or field, or you know, people who have like the
Absolutely.
groundbreaking ideas of the decade or century are there.
I'll just give a short story just about one of my professors, just because it just relates to what you said. So I had a professor called Michael Feiner who taught me leadership, okay? And he was the chief people officer at Pepsi. So we handled like, you know, hundreds of thousands of people. And the first day he comes into class, you know, we just heard that he was really strict and that he didn't like you being on time, like he didn't like you being late. So everyone showed up to class, you know, 10 minutes early, and we sit there, and he looks like a pretty gruff guy, whatever. And he walks in, he says, listen, okay, I know what you've heard about me, okay? It's all true, I am strict. And he's like, but I'm strict because I'm not strict about my time, I'm strict because I believe your time is valuable.
Yeah.
You could be out there doing anything you want. You could be sitting on the beach, you could be having a beer, you could be going on a date, but you're spending this time here with me, and I need to make that time valuable for you, okay? And he said, listen, I'm over here when you're in class, I just want your attention, and I want your enthusiasm and your effort, because I'm going to be a rock star. Like, you just had to think, go up and say, like, in front of all these guys, you know, who achieved a lot in their own things, like, I'm going to be a rock star. So, but are you going to bring it are you going to be worthy of like sitting in my class? And he just started off like that, and I can tell you, he had us Columbia just started the system of block week classes, which means, you know, what was supposed to be a vacation time, they actually made us go to class from 9 to 5 every day for people who wanted to. So it's pretty hard, you know, to keep someone's attention for like 8 hours, you know, for 5 days straight. This guy kept it absolutely, like, until the last second. I mean, we could not walk away from what he was saying, and he'd get us to interact and everything like that. You know, he wasn't like he just gave a monologue. Even though honestly, I believe he's definitely capable of this. He's capable of being that person. He's met, you know, Jack Welch and is a personal friend of his and stuff. But he was just brilliant. The way he taught us, the way he engaged us, the way he got these things, you know, he got them. Even today, I am still looking back and trying to implant the lessons that I learned from him. I still go back and, you know, one of the big reasons I realize how much I have to work on myself is because I know what he expects a leader to be and what he's taught me that a leader should be. And I realize where I still have that work to do.
Priyanka, anything for you on the ROI perspective?
So I had 8 as well. So
For you, it was money and time away from your husband. So that's
no, he moved.
He moved. Okay.
So we were very much around, but Columbia, it was like wandering into a candy store for me. I could just sit in on any class and just keep on listening. These people who were there, things that they had to share, things that they had seen, and how they thought about it. How they connected the dots of things you read in books to life, and back to some other book. You could just go on listening. That time, that 1 year, has really shaped all my work that came after that, all of it. And even today, for me, I do think when I write the next piece or the next story, would that professor of mine feel proud of this one or not? It is some mental yardstick that I do have, and I want to measure up to what he said a great journalist should be.
And I know that like
sorry,
business
I'm
schools still.
gonna have to end.
Oh, sure.
But thank you so much, guys, for these amazing stories. Very personal, very, very passionate, and you guys have definitely raised the bar for all the other Ivy League schools we've had sitting right here on this bench. So thank you so much. This has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you guys for being a fabulous audience.
Thank you.
So yeah, please go ahead.
That's it. So no, I was saying that Columbia, actually the business school allows you first of all to come back and audit a class or attend a class anytime you want.